very much. It's going to be a wonderful show.
What if I were to suggest that you play a key role in the awakening world? And that you are watching this because you have heard the call. We can start right now by opening our hearts and minds. Welcome to the awakening world. Good evening, everybody. I am Love Coach Scott Thomas, and welcome to the Awakening World and the start of our summer season. Winter for those of you in the other hemisphere. We're starting this season off with a very special show. My dearest, closest friend is Katrina Valancourt. She is with her beloved husband, Stephen. And we've been close friends for a long, long time. We've watched each other go through our ins and outs. When my wife was diagnosed that she was dying, the first person I called was Katrina, and she was there with me. So we've gone through a lot of life's experiences with each other. And one of those amazing life experiences is what tonight's show is going to be all about Katrina's amazing adventures doing her impersonation of Alice in Wonderland as she went down the rabbit hole and found her way back up, very much with the love and support of her amazing husband, Stephen. It's an incredible story that we're going to hear tonight, and it's all part of her brand new book. And tonight is the official international book launch for REQOVERY. There it is. So we're going to hear all about it. We definitely want to hear from all of you. So please, if you would like to start just by knowing who is aware of QAnon, who heard of QAnon, who had experiences or ideas about QAnon, pop that into the chat box. Thank you for those of you who already have. And we are going to do what we always do. We love to start the show off with wonderful music with our house musical artist. He's not Mr. Q, he's Mr. O.
Sorry, Mr. O. Namaste and welcome everybody, and greetings to everybody watching on Facebook and YouTube and all of our broadcast partners. And I am, for some reason, really excited about tonight's show. I met Katrina when I was in Sedona, and I felt her so deeply, and her integrity, her beauty, her intent. And if I had to go somewhere for help, she would be somebody I would trust implicitly. And when I knew that her husband, Stephen, was involved in tonight's show, and they were going to share some of their weaving through this time, I was, even if I wasn't playing the music, I'd be here. So I have a song called Total Surrender, because that's what is necessary sometimes. And yes, one can move and groove to it. So without further ado, lots of people are coming into the room, Scott.
In the event of a terminal day, I would turn to you. I would say, please help me. Help me see through this illusion. The tears would fall, my knees would bend. I'd lift my hands up to the heavens. Help me. Help me out of this illusion. My trust is in you, my faith is strong. I hear the call, it won't be long with the sunrise and the light of a brand new day. I hear you say, give me total surrender. I'm coming your way. You came with me out of the mist, a violet glow, an amethyst of beauty, never seen on earth before. I'll come with you into the light, my starry eyes are burning bright. I trust you, and now I know the reason why. I hear you say, give me total surrender. I'm coming your way. I need total surrender. There's no compromise. Come dry your eyes, give me total surrender. Whoa.
Let's go to gallery view and give a twinkle.
Twinkle, twinkle.
That are new to our show, we twinkle our appreciations.
Total surrender. And I know that Katrina had to do some total surrendering. So namaste, namasko, see you in a bit.
I got to say, her husband had to do some pretty significant total surrender as
I was
well.
going to comment on how relevant that song is and those lyrics.
Good. Thank you, brother. See you.
Hey, I want to invite people a few things, a few ground rules. I recognize we've got some new friends with us tonight, and welcome everybody. For those of you that are new, welcome to the Global Peace Tribe. And the majority of people right now are watching us on our broadcast partners. Facebook, we've got to about 100, 125 Facebook groups and pages, YouTube channels. And I want to invite you to come and join us. Come and join the Global Peace Tribe. This is a great time to do that because this is the start of our new season. We do 2 or 3 shows every week, always Wednesday night and Saturday night. We now are going to be doing at least 1 Sacred Sunday show every morning. We do a film series and we do special events from festivals and conferences. It's a way to really be inspired and connected. And it's really easy. Just go to globalpeacetribe.com. Globalpeacetribe.com. You can learn all about us. Click register for the new season. That'll take you to our registration page. We've got a lot of different options of ways that you can join us. And you'll get the Zoom room links right away. It'll bring you right into our Zoom room for tonight. And we're going to have a really powerful conversation. We're going to hear all about Katrina's amazing story, and we have a powerful conversation. Always, we are very respectful. So please, let's not go down any, we're not going to go into politics tonight. I might briefly mention how politics created an impression or an experience, but it's not a political debate. This is about a person's experience. All of us have had moments where we've gotten caught up in something that maybe didn't turn out to be what we thought it was, or maybe had hurtful consequences on people we cared about. That's what we're talking about tonight. So it's going to be a respectful and dynamic conversation. We do want to hear from you, but always in a loving and positive way. And with that, it's my pleasure to bring up my beloved friends, and both of them are true beloveds. This is Katrina and Stephen, and they've been together 7 years now. Yeah,
I think 8 now.
8?
Yep.
we're at 8. Okay, at 8 years. And I'm going to go right into asking you, Katrina, a little bit about your background. Maybe explain to people, maybe even as you first were introduced to QAnon, what was your introduction? That might help people to understand both a little bit about Q and a little bit about what was attractive about it for you.
Sure. So my background is difficult to talk about QAnon without talking about politics because it's so interwoven. But again, this is not political debate. My background, I was born and raised in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a very Democratic stronghold in Wisconsin. I then, in my adulthood, moved out to Santa Cruz, and then I've been in the Bay Area. So I have consistently been surrounded by Democrat politics. My family, my community, in 2020, when I went through this experience, I would say that 99% of everyone I knew and related to was somewhere on the left end of the political spectrum. So I think it's important to include that in my background as part of the context for how bizarre this particular experience was. Another part of my background is that I am a nonviolent communications certified trainer. I was actually 16 years into my practice and teaching of nonviolent communication when we hit 2020. And I was going through my certification process while also going through this experience. And so my nonviolent communication assessor and my what we call pod mates, people who I was working towards certification with, were part of my support system as I worked through recovery from this experience. Is there anything else you think they might want to know about me? That's probably good.
I think that's good.
Okay, great.
I'll add something.
Okay.
My experience with Katrina is she's very sensitive and cares deeply about the world, and has gone through phases, as I'm sure many of us can relate to, of being really terrified about some of the events going on in the world and the future of the world. And I think that's an important part of the story as I understand it, Katrina.
Mhm. Thank you. You know, when I hear you say that, I notice there's kind of an irony, which is that if we look at the state of the world right now, compared to like 2020 or 2016, well, 2020 was pretty bad compared to 2016 or things leading up to that, um, things have not gotten better. You know, the problems that we've been dealing with in our country and as a global community, our earth systems, things are getting worse. And yet what's true about what you said, Scott, is that I used to go into pretty extreme anxiety about that on a regular basis. So touching into that right now, I'm a mother. My son's actually here in the Zoom room with us, and I'm so grateful you're here. And so it's deep in my heart to seek to live in a way that contributes to a better world for the next generation. And very deep in me. So as climate change has accelerated, as I've seen our environment devastated by various industrial practices, as I've seen our health on decline, as I've seen the rise of AI used with social media to sink people into rabbit holes and other ideological extremes, all of this has really stimulated a lot of concern in me. And certainly that was very alive in 2020. As a reminder, so I fell into the QAnon rabbit hole in June, June 12th to be exact, starting at about 11 o'clock at night, 6-hour flip. In that time, when I fell into the rabbit hole, we were 3 months into the COVID lockdowns. Bernie Sanders had, he was my hero. He was the one who I was putting my faith in. He was the one who was going to lead us all and fix the problems of the world. And he endorsed Biden. For me, that was a devastation. I didn't trust that Biden would be the person to do the job that I felt needed to be done. So I was in that disillusionment. The lockdowns were very difficult on me. I'm an extrovert. Having social connection, live social connection, is really essential to my sense of well-being. And there were a number of other stressors that culminated at the time that I fell into this rabbit hole. And I do believe that if it weren't for the lockdowns and that extreme stress, that boredom, that going online a lot, and the culmination of all of these anxieties, I wouldn't have been vulnerable to something like this, but it was a very unusual circumstance. So actually, chapter 1 after the introduction in my book is called Unusual Stress. And it really talks about what was building in me before this event that happened over the course of 6 hours overnight that had me flip from being a Bernie Sanders supporter to a QAnon Trump supporter, which Stephen got to wake up to the next morning.
Literally.
Literally. I think I'll pause at that.
Yeah, so what about QAnon attracted you? What was the turn on?
The basic turn on was that I watched a video series that turns out to be probably the most effective video series to flipping people's minds into QAnon. There were a number of videos I watched about QAnon as I was in my recovery, and I heard this particular video mentioned a number of times by various believers. So basically what the video said is there are a lot of really horrible things going on in the world, and it listed off the various horrible things that I was already familiar with, but it also added other things in that I was not familiar with. And I was like, huh, that's strange. I don't like to think that that's going on, including some of the very dark fantasies that QAnon is most known for, which culminated in the idea that there is an evil cabal that is basically ruling the earth, ruling humanity, using manipulation of money and the abuse of children to create suffering, all for power, and that there's good people in the government, including the hero, which is Q. Q is actually, there's something called Q clearance, and it's actually like the highest clearance in our government. I looked that up. It appears to be true. And so supposedly Q and the good people in the government have been able to track down and watch this cabal. They see what they're up to. Don't worry, they've got it handled. And they've recognized that, as strange of a pick as it is, Trump is the guy to lead the way as president, to fulfill the plan, to take down the cabal, to rid the earth of evil and suffering, so that we actually have the liberty and freedom we need as good-hearted human beings to restore the earth and to restore life systems so that we can have the kind of world that we all dream of. So that's the basic narrative, and that was just worlds better than the fear that I had the night before.
Yeah, and I guess, for my 2 cents, because I watched the video maybe a week or two afterwards, and it was clear to me how Katrina could get wrapped in. It's very
sensational.
It's sensational. It's fast paced. It's fast moving. It creates
emotional, hypnotic.
It creates a very compelling story for all of the problems in the world. And at the end, there's a solution. And for someone like Katrina at the time, who was feeling, I think, disillusioned with a lot of the solutions that she saw as viable, to have this essentially served on a plate. Here's all the problems, and here's how it's going to be fixed. It was very attractive to her. So I got it when I saw it. And yeah.
There's another piece to that, because one of the things in the video that made it effective is it said, don't take my word for it. Just watch this video and then do your own research. Check out everything that I'm telling you. And I was like, okay, cool. Good idea. I'll look at these weird things and see if they're true or not. I didn't know, I had no idea what QAnon was. Like, at the time, it was just not on my radar. So nor did I know that it started in October of 2017. And by June of 2020, there was QAnon content all over the internet. And so as soon as I started to, quote unquote, do my research and look for these very bizarre points of information, I found pages and pages and pages of content saying this is absolutely true. And so that put me in a, oh my God, like, I didn't, I was questioning it until I did my research. And now I'm getting all of this validation. But the other thing I didn't know was that when I did all of that research on Google, Google had AI algorithms in place, as did Facebook and YouTube, that went, oh, you like that? Let me send you more. And it started to confirm my bias. Unfortunately, this is what so many of our online social media companies are doing. They want to capture your attention. So they look at what you click on and they give you more and more and more. And they go, oh, you know what? Somebody who watched that video also really liked this video. Let me show you that one. So all of a sudden you end up in this echo chamber that was, populated by people who got stirred up by QAnon, but then it became like almost cemented by these social media AI algorithms. There's a documentary film called The Social Dilemma. It was made by Tristan Harris, who is the founder of the Center for Humane Technology. It talks about how these algorithms work. And he tried to blow the whistle on the companies. And ultimately they said they didn't listen, because user attention is profitable. And when you have a free platform like Facebook or YouTube or whatever it may be, user attention is what gives you high-paying advertisers, and the unfortunate bottom line is profit. And it's easy to just turn a blind eye to all of these harms that are coming from utilizing those strategies.
Yeah, that's a big part of what we need to learn, is how to have critical thinking, because the algorithms just keep feeding us what we already believe.
Exactly.
There's a great question that's actually already come in, and I do want to take people's questions. This is from Ayada. She wants to know, what was the fix? Like, okay, you saw these problems, you could relate because the problems that we all know, I think most of us know that there's governments within the government. So, you got all this information that was like helping you to increase your paranoia and also the problems. What was the fix that was so attractive to you?
I'm not sure if I completely understand when you say what was the
How did you
fix
come
that was
out?
so, how did I get out?
Yeah.
That's the
No, no,
question?
no, no.
Oh,
You said that they presented all the problems.
Oh, the
They presented a solution, the fix.
the solution. Yeah, the solution is that there are what are called white hats in the government. And no doubt there are really people in our government who are stellar people. They care so much about the world. They're truly in service. They want the best outcome. They're there because that feels like their mission, purpose in life, and the way they can make the world a better place. So in QAnon, they would call these people white hats, although the white hats in the QAnon lore would be people who are working together, and they see the corruption that's happening, and they're organizing, and they've been planning and organizing together for a long time. Some QAnons believe that this white hat group is headed up by John F. Kennedy Jr. So that goes into a whole other lore. And that Q is a member of the White
John F.
Hats.
Kennedy Jr., the one who died in
The one who
19.
died in 19, yes, thank
Right.
you, details.
Yeah.
And that they have created a plan, which in QAnon is called the plan. We don't know what the plan is, but they have a plan. And their plan is basically to be able to track down all of the criminal things that members of the cabal and those that they have manipulated have done and gotten away with, so that they can all be brought to justice. And in that process of justice, they can end up in Guantanamo Bay or some holding center where they're no longer able to cause harm. And so by ridding the government, by pulling out, some people might call it the deep state, on the conservative realm, they'll call it the swamp. By ridding our government of these corrupt black hats, is what they're sometimes called. When we can rid the government of that, then all of the goodness, right? All of the people who actually have ethical leadership will be able to function in the way that they have wanted to function, creating the world that we'd like to see. Does that answer that question?
I think so, yeah. I mean, so tell us then about the community. So now you're turned on to QAnon, you want to know more. Then what were your next steps that pulled you in even more deeply? Including, I know, the community, that you got excited about the QAnon community, the QAnon tribe, so to speak.
Yeah, so there's something thrilling when you think that you have seen a secret that's been hidden from humanity, right? So I was in this like, oh my God, I've just seen something, and we don't have to be afraid. Everything's going to be okay. I just need you to see Q, and Donald Trump is not a bad person. And, I was in this enthusiasm about it. Stephen didn't join me there. That was a challenge. That's also in our book. And we're still locked down. We're still in the pandemic. So I start posting some things online that are kind of pushing around the edges of what I've just seen. And very quickly, I'm able to see on Facebook who else is a QAnon, who else has seen what I believe is behind the curtain, the truth behind reality. And so within the first 24 hours, I was able to identify about 12 people who are friends on Facebook. Doesn't necessarily mean I know them well, but I'm connected to them on Facebook, who were giving signals, including where we go one, we go all, or WWGWGA, which is a sign, is basically saying I'm a QAnon. I'm awake. I can see what's happening. We're going to end the cabal. Peace on earth is going to happen. Go team humanity. We just need to wake people up. So I'm starting to gravitate towards that. because the promise of problems disappearing, the promise that we could actually have this beautiful world is something that filled me with a sense of elation. I just wanted to hold on to it with every ounce of my being. And I mean, so much so, my entire biology shifted. The day before, I was spinning in fear and anxiety. And once my mind flipped and gravitated towards this, this perspective, I felt profound relief, joy, gratitude. I found myself singing. I was saying, thank you, God, even though I'm not a religious person. I mean, I say that when I'm grateful, but it was over the top. I was, singing Amazing Grace, just feeling wonderful. And then Steve and I would have our very uncomfortable interactions. And so it started to create this challenging split where it was difficult for me to be around Stephen. He was having a hard time being around me. So I felt just this tension around him, whereas I'm finding other people online who are celebrating with me, basically. And we're celebrating that there's a new world coming. There's a beautiful new world coming. And isn't this wonderful? Isn't this great? So it just created a natural magnetism towards others who shared this hope and this vision for the future.
Yes, I think what I observed in that regard was I was watching a lot of Katrina's community, historical community, distancing themselves. And so there was the tension that she was feeling from her historical community, and there was a warm embrace, a welcoming from the QAnon community. And so it naturally just pulled her into that community.
Yeah, you want to be with people who understand you and say, I see you, I got you, how wonderful, I celebrate you.
We all want to belong to a tribe, right? We've got Global Peace Tribe, there's a family of people. We gather together twice a week and we connect. And so it's such human nature. So I think it's important for us to look at, again, solutions to big problems, a welcoming community. This is, makes it a very attractive package. So it's totally understandable. And I can remember Katrina calling me and she was so excited because she found this wonderful thing. The world was we're going to be saved. Everything is good. And I was skeptical. Stephen, what can you share that you feel comfortable about how this was for you, watching the woman that you love being happier, but also going down the rabbit hole? What was your experience like?
Yeah, well, challenging to say the least. And I'll underscore, Katrina mentioned it was it was an overnight flip, literally. I fell asleep and Katrina was working on her computer. I woke up the next morning and she was still awake, working on her computer, watching this video and doing her research. And overnight, her energy shifted and it became, she had kind of a frenetic energy about her. And at one point I had asked her, or I had said to her, I don't recognize who you are anymore. Because she had really just her whole persona had shifted. And, as we started to peel back layers of the onion, it took a while to really understand where she was going. Finally, I think maybe it was a week or two in, she asked me to watch the video that had brought her in. So then I got a real understanding of what she was now believing, and that caused me to think about, okay, what do I do here? There wasn't an easy, clear answer at that time. Yeah, it was a process for me as much as it was for her.
I want to read a couple comments that have come in from our audience that I think are really valuable. Karen S. points out how QAnon took something meant for good, but then kind of manipulated it, which is, again, almost all cults or almost all movements like this do begin with some truth. And then, I mean, look at the Christian religion. It started with the beautiful Christ teachings, and the Roman Catholic Church is probably responsible for more death and suffering than any other institution that's lasted for 2,000 years. It's again, it's such a human thing. I think you're going to appreciate this comment that came in, because that's the point of tonight's show, is to help people understand. And Carol Craig, coming to us from Trinidad, writes, my two sisters are inherently good people, and now I can totally understand what's happened to them. One is rather fearful and the other hateful, and both have had their seeds watered by this ideology. They're perfect candidates for what you're talking about. So I'm glad, Carol, this is helping you to have understanding. Susan writes, anxiety is not necessarily something to avoid. Embracing anxiety and honoring it as a warning signal to be acknowledged and appreciated. This is not easy, but it brings freedom. Thank you. That's a good point, Susan.
Mhm.
So now you're in this growing split between you and your new QAnon world and kind of the more grounded, stable view of your husband and other friends. Tell us more about the price paid and the challenges of the ever-growing divide and that chapter of your story.
Yeah. I noticed I'm wanting to backtrack on something, even though it's a bit of a tangent. But this piece about how QAnon started off as something beautiful and then got manipulated. QAnon is not actually well defined. Just to give some context, the way it started was somebody, we don't even know who. We don't know if it was a single people, a group of people, if it was a constant person, if it changed. People have done research. We've never figured out who Q is. But whoever Q is, they started posting on these very cryptic messaging boards called 4chan and 8chan. And they're messaging boards that had a lot of hate, a lot of white supremacy, a lot of really twisted erotic stuff. The turns out Anonymous, the digital hacktivists, also sprung from there. So it's not all, it's a mixed bag in there, but there's a lot of stuff in there. And what QAnon is it's what people made up about those messages that came on the board. If you just look at the messages, it doesn't represent QAnon. QAnon is this thing that grew as people started to make up stories around what all of the hidden messages from these Q drops meant. And so there are people who are called bakers, and they're the ones who try and decipher the Q drops. They become the experts. And then there's more and more experts. And then there's influencers who are building YouTube channels and other media channels. And so QAnon becomes this amorphous thing where anybody can throw their influence in. If you have actors even out of Russia or North Korea or Iran or China who want to weave their propaganda into QAnon, they can do it, because all they need to do is influence one of the influencers who says, I am an authority on QAnon. So I also
think it's important to understand that there are different entry points to QAnon.
Definitely.
So Katrina kind of fell into, what is it, the
Pastel Q.
Pastel Q,
Mhm.
which really was playing on the child molestation, child trafficking angle, which of course would capture any of our hearts as something that is problematic. And it made it into this pervasive and a pervasive problem that was being essentially managed by people who you would say that's absurd. But that was the case. But there were also entry points in the white supremacy realm
Mhm.
and
Pro-Trump realm, of course.
yeah, and so there were different entry points to this. And one of the things that was shocking to me is as we were learning this over the years, at one point we heard that there were like 30 million people around the world who were
Believe in it to
who were
some
believers of this belief
significant
system.
degree.
That meaningful
Mhm.
international body of followers.
Yeah.
So it's not something to be thought lightly of in any means.
Yeah. 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 So the pastel Q track emphasizes child protection, appeals to maternal instincts, and promotes natural health and spirituality. That was my entry point. That's what I was drawn to as well. There's a bit of a buffet, right? Those social media algorithms look at what you like and they give you more of that. And so whatever people's entry point is, they will search for whatever they're interested in and they'll get that version of QAnon. So there's a basic narrative about Q and Trump and the white hats, but then there's all kinds of spinoffs. There's probably infinite spinoffs. So we can't capture it like we might be able to Christianity and the various sects of Christian belief.
There's some interesting comments coming in from the audience, so I want to read some of them. Kathy Seagate points out that a man in New Jersey was posting the Q posts and was arrested years ago, so there's that possibility. In a moment, a question about how does Trump come into the picture? So again, not going political, but just sharing kind of the more historical part of that. Now, this is a very interesting comment from Elizabeth Sartoris, she's a presenter on our show sometimes. She's a highly respected person. Elizabeth writes, a dear friend of mine, a yoga queen and conflict resolution expert, did 49 peacekeeping trips to the Soviet Union under Gorbachev, who gave her an office in the KGB building in Moscow.
Oh.
She learned that the KGB invented QAnon. Its first play out in the United States did not last, but when Trump and AI algorithms came onto the scene, they revived it. So that's a very interesting, just 1 second, Lori. I'm going to read a couple more things and then see what you have to say. Karen Stewart writes, white supremacy had nothing to do with the original thing that we were waiting for. That was one of the things that was added in, but things were distorted. So there's that. And do you want to explain a little bit about where Trump fits into all of this?
Sure. I think the guy in New Jersey, by the way, I think he was just reposting them and consolidated a website, but I don't think he originated the drops. Trump fits into it because the story is that these white hats in the government and this deep state insider Q, the really good guy, has looked at all of the presidential candidates that could possibly work as an ally with the plan to overcome the cabal, and they've identified Donald Trump for whatever reasons, including that he's got so much money he can't be purchased by special interests.
And he was a political outsider.
And he's a political outsider, and who knows what else. I don't know that there was really a case built except for trust the plan.
Right.
The plan is that Donald Trump is going to do this. And then the video I watched started to also give evidence to show how Donald Trump was using special signals and to communicate things secretively that other people could read his signals and understand, or how he was taking down child sex traffickers in a way that no other president ever had. I haven't fact checked all of that stuff. I just know that at the time that I watched it, I was very influenced by what I saw in the video to show that, he's actually doing a bunch of good things that were totally outside of my visibility. That wasn't too far a stretch. Well, it was a pretty far stretch for my mind to go to. And I was in a place of recognizing that I felt nausea and anger when I saw Donald Trump's face or heard his voice. And as somebody committed to nonviolent communication and empathy and building connection across the aisles in every way possible, I had weeks before this, maybe more than a month before this, really challenged myself, like, can I find things that I like about him enough so that I don't have such a strong aversion to him? And there were a few things I was able to find. So I had the door cracked open to the possibility that maybe what I had learned about him was disinformation by the cabal, because they felt so threatened by him, they wanted to take him down. So that's another part of the QAnon perspective, is that everything critical of Donald Trump is promoted by the evil cabal because they're so threatened by him, they can't have him in power. And so don't trust any of the media, don't trust anything that says anything negative about him. He's really the hero that's going to save the day. That's part of the belief. Is there
So,
another question?
yeah, thank you. So let's now go into your relationship with Stephen. And also, I don't know if you want to talk about how your father, was involved. I know Rob is right there with you.
Yes.
So tell us about how, as you were going down the rabbit hole, the people that stayed with you, and of course it was hurtful because I know that you did lose some friends. Tell us about that part of it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, gratefully, my relationships have recovered. So I'll share the good news first. As I shared, I'm an extrovert. Social connection for me is so important. I'm a very sensitive person. I seek to care, to contribute, to give empathy, to really love the people around me. And like Scott, I have a very expansive community. And so it was shocking for me to see how quickly people turn their backs on me. How quickly they would say unkind things to me in comments on Facebook, how quickly they would block me. So I had a massive amount of social rejection that the only thing I could understand is they've all been brainwashed by the cabal. They can't see how I'm trying to wake them up. I'm trying so hard because I don't want them to be harmed by the dark and sinister plans coming in. I just need to wake them up to what's going on. I love them so much. Can't they see that? That's the place I was coming from. And almost across the board, it was rejection. It was people blocking me, and it was people, some like seriously digging into me and name calling. And that was quite challenging. With Stephen, we had a lot to navigate. He's a Superman for staying by my side through that. It's really superhuman in ways. There was at least one person in our community who took it on his own behest to call Stephen and to try and convince him for the longest time that he needed to break up with me. He needed to end the relationship. He needed me to just go on my path and do all the social damage and crash my life and pay the consequences, because there's no other way I would wake up. And Stephen chose not to do that.
Yeah. So Stephen, how did you make it through those hard times?
Oh, I drank a lot. No, just
He doesn't drink.
I don't drink. That was just a joke. Yeah. I think what was important for me was getting a lot of outside support. I had a longstanding relationship with my own personal therapist. I actually ended up consulting with an additional 2 therapists and 2 psychiatrists, just trying to figure out how do I deal with this. And it ended up being that my personal therapist was the most instructive in that. I also tried to kind of build a support mechanism amongst family and friends, which, to be honest, was a little bit more challenging because Katrina was being fairly guarded about her beliefs to that inner core group. So her father was instrumental and a great advocate and collaborator with me. And I feel blessed to have had him by my side through all of this. Same with her son, Jaden. But I can remember talking to a couple of her close friends and community, and they're like, no, you're full of shit. That's not Katrina. No, it can't be, because she hadn't opened the kimono to them fully about
Okay.
what her beliefs were. And so I was getting gaslighted regularly, and it was just like, okay, I gotta just take that as, there's only a few people that I can really rely on here as my support group. I think mechanistically, or I'm not sure that's the right word, but the way I interacted with Katrina, which also evolved over time, was to really come from a place of patience and curiosity, which was, again, it was advised by my therapist to really kind of think of this as if she's gone to become a born-again Christian or taken on some other belief system that she's become embedded in, and to just really become curious about it. And so I did, and we had to set up ground rules around that. One of the things that was important for our peace of mind and our ability to continue together was, really constraining conversations about this stuff to specific periods when we were both resourced enough to do it. We knew the conversations were coming. We were ready. I can remember going into my own personal mindset of, okay, remember, be curious, be open-minded, have to just keep telling myself, don't judge, just listen.
Mhm.
And then as time went on, I would find things where Katrina might, I might say, would you be open to an alternative view on that if I could find you some information? And so I would start picking individual items and doing some research and saying, here, take a look at this as an alternative view.
Mhm.
And over time, that started to chip away and
Mhm.
create at least questions in Katrina's mind as to, what am I really believing the right things here? Or I see that there are alternative views. And I think, just to take a step back, one of the things that I tried to coach Katrina on early on was to get off of social media.
Fuck, I was
and-
so addicted at the time.
You
I was in
were.
a fear trance around it.
Yeah.
Do you know what's going on?
Right. But part of that was to stop posting things,
Yes.
because I was bringing
Yes, you helped to
into
moderate that.
her attention that her posts were starting to create discord and detachment from the community that she values so highly.
Mhm.
And so I just questioned her, is that really where you want to go with this? And so that kind of slowed her down in that regard. So that was important.
Mhm.
And I lost what I was, the next thing I was going to say. But
Okay.
sure.
One of the things I also noticed is that when I did share things with you, it wasn't always 100%, well, I don't believe that's true. There were some times where you would say, well, there's some truth to this. And then you try and parse apart
Mhm.
what was true from what was not.
Yeah.
And for me, that was really important, because if he had just said, none of this is true, everything you're saying is completely full of it, I wouldn't have felt safe with him. And I would have been in this conflict of like, he's my husband, I want to talk to him, but he doesn't listen. I would have had some conflict. But you did really seek to look at where is there truth, and how can we be more objective where there is not.
And that was the other thing that I was going to mention, if I may, just very, very briefly.
Take it down.
Truth. So I started to plead with Katrina to move away from a place of believing that what her belief was the capital T truth, and just to acknowledge that it's what she believes. And there's a big difference between a belief and the capital T truth. And the fact of the matter is, we, and most, if not all, of the people on this call really can't know what the truth is, the capital T truth, about political stuff, about stuff happening in other places. All we can know is what's directly in front of us, what we experience personally.
Mhm.
And so I tried to separate this mindset of, I know the truth, and you don't, and I need to bring you along this path to the truth versus this is what I believe. And if this is what I believe, then can you have room for what I believe? And then that creates an opportunity for a dialogue.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you just shared that, because Stephen just shared two really important things for us to remember. When do we get hooked into thinking we know the truth with a capital T? And that's a very vulnerable time, because we as human beings, we want to believe it was special. We want to believe we've got that inside track, you know, and I mean, it goes all the way back, all through humanity. Human beings are prone to believing that they are closer to the truth than others, and then that creates discord. The other thing that he said before that's really important, when we're with someone who has a different political belief or has a different spiritual belief, be willing to see it from their point of view. Don't just immediately discard it as not true or not real, because it's real for them in the moment, or it's real for them in a big way. So let's learn to be curious about why people believe something, and to not polarize, because right now, what's tearing this country apart and creating a civil war, and at least in a social media way, is polarization. You know, back in the days of Walter Cronkite, you know, there was still objective news. There was still different points and counterpoints. I remember growing up with a show called Points and Counterpoints. Katrina works a lot with our friend John Kenyon, who has a program called Across the Aisle, bringing people across the aisle together. There's so little of that happening right now. The polarization is so terrible. And because of the algorithms feeding us what we already believe, it's getting even worse. So we, as global peace drivers, we really want to create peace. We've got to be open-minded and be curious about people who have beliefs other than our own. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask one more question, take a couple comments, and then it's time for our mid-show Omashar break. So we'll go to Omashar in a moment. But there's a lot of wonderful comments coming on in the chat box. I'm just going to read a few. Elizabeth Sartoris writes, "Congratulations, Stephen, on getting help and sticking with Katrina. In my dear friend's case, her husband went down the rabbit hole with her. This situation broke up a wonderful social family after almost 20 years together. I kept trying to heal things, but never succeeded. I still want to try, and your story, Stephen, is helping to inspire me." That's very beautiful. Dia Therese writes, "Agreed, Scott. Stephen just spoke capital T truth, and this point is key, the understanding of this entire presentation tonight." And there's other people appreciating. And Drina Joy pointed something interesting out. She did a, Dorina writes, "It's interesting that years ago, QAnon search on YouTube would result in tons of shorts and videos. Well, right now, the only one that shows up is our current Awakening World live stream by Soul Search and the images of Katrina and Stephen. Nothing else directly related to QAnon." That's because
it's possible this video will disappear because the word QAnon is in it. The algorithms will search for that and boom, censored. Doesn't they won't necessarily look at the context, unfortunately.
Yeah, so it's very, very interesting. All right, question that comes up. So there's a question actually from one of our Facebook audience of wanting to know if Stephen ever actually considered leaving the relationship. Obviously you made it, so you can tell the truth now, but did you ever consider leaving the relationship?
Yes. I had given myself 6 months to either see if Katrina was going to come back out the other end, which thankfully she did, or if we could find a happy place, even if she didn't. So that was the end of the year, and her beliefs started to crack in November. And so, yeah, but I had it in my mind that there was an exit point if we couldn't make it work. But I gave it that 6 months
All in.
all in to try to make it work.
Well, we're glad that you did. We're going to hear after Omashar's song how coming back out of the rabbit hole. Now we're going to learn about dropping down, and we're going to learn about the entryway back up. And everybody's continue to put your thoughts, comments, questions into the chat box. I'll try and check what's going on Facebook. And here's Omashar.
Okay, and now for something completely different. So let's take a few deep breaths together. Let's remember to breathe. It's always a good thing. All right. Oh, where are we? Contemplating everything I knew. Seems as though there's not much left that I would hold on to. Contemplating what is pure and true. Sun and moon and stars and light and earth and water too. We are rising, soaring, flying, living life so free. We are flowing, changing, growing, loving all we see. Glad to know we're coming home again. Open hearts and open minds and loving friends and open doors. Look at the one who's standing by you now. Destiny is in our hands, so leave the density behind. 'Cause we are rising, soaring, flying, living life so free. We are flowing, changing, growing, loving all we see. Turning to the face of those who need the light of truth to help them turn the other cheek and turn around. Lift each other up into the highest point of view so that together we can move to higher ground. Glad to know we're coming home again. Open hearts and open minds and open doors and loving friends. Look at the one who's standing by you now. Destiny is in our hands, so leave the density behind. 'Cause we are flying, soaring, living life so free. We are flowing, changing, growing, loving all we see. And turning to the face of those who need the light of truth to help them turn the other cheek and turn around. We lift each other up into the highest point of view so that together we can move to higher ground. Contemplating everything I knew. Seems as though there's not much left that I would hold on to.
Hmm, what a perfect song for tonight's show. Hey, let's all twinkle, beloved Omashar. I mean, those words, those lyrics, Omashar, are like
I wrote them for Katrina and Stephen, knowing that they would be right bullseye or heart's eye.
yeah, wow. Hey, I want to remind everybody that we can all support our beloved brother Omashar by buying his music, and you can get it by going to Bandcamp. If you just go to his name, omashar.bandcamp.com, there are 5 wonderful albums there, all waiting for you to, and that way you don't have to wait until the next Wednesday or Saturday night. You can listen to Omashar anytime. So let's all support our beloved brother.
Thank you, brother, and I shall see you later.
Okay, yeah, there will be a closing song, as
And
always.
Katrina, Stephen, this is. I was going to say riveting, but it's just so rich and vibrant. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable. Holy smoke! Thank you.
So
Yeah.
as we begin to look at how the healing and the change happened, I want to acknowledge, again, nonviolent communication, which has been a big part of Katrina's life and now for Stephen's. So how did nonviolent communication, also known as compassionate communication, help you guys during the hard time? And then how did it help during the healing time?
So before we do that, Scott, if I may, I just want to say a couple of things if I could. And it's specifically about Recovery, the book. And I really want to give Katrina kudos for this. You know, in many ways, it's a memoir, but the amount of research that she did on this book, she's been working on it now for 18 months. It's a case study. She went back and she pulled communications from 2000, 2001, you know, direct quotes that she and I shared and she shared with friends. So you can actually see this thing unfolding. And to me, it's a compelling read. And I know people that we shared the story with found it that way as well. And it's also very thoroughly researched. There's maybe 500 plus endnotes with references to articles and things that were sources for her. So it's a great story and it's a resource. So I just wanted to say that. So.
Yeah, and I'll also say a lot of the end notes are from mainstream media channels because in general, the people in my circle, those are the channels that they're going to trust the most. So I wasn't able to put everything in a mainstream channel. There's some bizarre things, and I just needed to do some alternative channel to say this actually exists online. This is what I was seeing. So the end notes are also just to say what you see is what builds the stories for your own narrative, your own perspective. So the end notes are what I saw while I was in QAnon and also things that I have seen before, after, outside of that just give context. But yeah, thank you. I think it's well researched too.
I also want to give a big shout out to Lori Masters.
Yes, Lori's here with us on Zoom. She is a masterful editor, precision revision. I couldn't have had a better partner for this book. It was not an easy one. This thing is a serious can of worms. Hey, Lori, love you.
Thank you, Lori. You did amazing.
When I contacted her in February and I said, you know, my friend Sarah Nelson, wife to Daniel Sheehan, who I know a lot of you know and love. Sarah, I told her about the book in February and she said, you have to get that out as soon as possible. So Stephen and I decided to reach out to Lori Masters and she goes, oh, wow. Okay, well, this book would take at least a year, but let's do it. And so, you know, here we are, July 3rd. She went round the clock with me every single day. We were back and forth with each other, sending each other chapters. You know, I'd send her a chapter, she'd do her editing magic, send it back to me, I'd send her the next chapter. And each chapter would go through, you know, anywhere from 5 to 25 iterations as we cleaned it and polished it and moved things around. I have a great aunt who is a Harvard trained editor who began reading the book a few weeks ago. And she said, wow, I'm really surprised by the quality of this book. There's very little to clean up. It's the kind of manuscript that I might give to another editor for a final cleaning. So feeling great about it on that level. As you might have seen in the comments as well, Scott had posted some endorsements. We got a beautiful endorsement from Jamil Zaki. He is a professor of psychology at Stanford. He interviewed me for one of the books that he has coming out in September called Hope for Cynics. His expertise is empathy. So it was just really an honor to get to know him and to participate in his creation of this book coming out. Barbara McGraw, Professor Barbara McGraw, she is, I have to read it down here because it's hard for me to remember it all. She's a professor of social ethics, law, and public life and politics, director of the Center for Engaged Religious Pluralism at St. Mary's College of California, and the author of Rediscovering America's Sacred Ground. So she's here with us. She's actually also in the introduction to the book because I was hanging out with my friends Patrick and Barbara, and I'd confided with Patrick, but not with Barbara yet, about this crazy QAnon thing I went through. Of course, he told his wonderful wife, who's dear beloved of mine, and she goes, "Oh, you got to tell me all about it." And as soon as I started talking about it, she's like, "You have to write a book." I was like, "No." I really had so much resistance to it. Stephen had been telling me I had to write a book for quite a while, and I was like, "Well, that's your nice opinion, and I will file it away in the trash can somewhere because I don't want to write the book." It was really confronting. It was traumatic to go through the experience of losing everyone and having what we would call enemy images, right? The name calling that's rampant online. In nonviolent communication, we call those enemy images. You know, you want to make somebody look like they're a horrible person, call them a terrorist, call them a white supremacist, call them a libertard or a fascist. These names are flying around as if words cause no harm. They cause harm. They cause harm. One of the things we need to do as responsible citizens is look at our digital citizenship. How are we interacting with people who we don't even know online? Are we falling into those ways of just saying, I'm just going to vent my anger because I don't actually have to see the harm that it causes? Or are we taking the time to say, I don't know this person, but they're my brother, they're my sister, they're my family, and I will treat them with the same respect I want to bring to any human being. So if there's a message I could bring out, yes.
With that, Scott's question about how did NVC play into your reconciliation process, your transition through?
Yeah. So nonviolent communication, a core teaching is empathy first. And it's my favorite workshop actually to teach is about empathy. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know are the unconscious ways in which we are conditioned to give non-empathic responses. A non-empathic response might be to be dismissive, to give advice, to judge the other person, to just say, oh, well, you think that's bad, you know, what about this, to make it your own thing. There's a lot of ways in which we miss the opportunity for real connection. When Stephen was saying, I don't want to hear your QAnon news right now. I don't want to hear what you've learned about Trump. I don't want to hear what you've learned about any of the topics around QAnon. He was stating a boundary. If I had overstepped that boundary, then I would be violating consent. There's a causing harm that happens there, and that would create conflict. So one thing is first of all, recognizing that he doesn't consent to a conversation. The second thing is empathy. Like, okay, it sounds like you've reached your limit. It sounds like you might be feeling frustrated. Maybe you don't have the space for it right now. It might be that right now you'd like to relax and enjoy life as opposed to talking about this. But for me to, rather than making him wrong for not wanting to go there, I had to go, okay, he has his limits and let me honor that. That is a form of empathy. So that helped to prevent damages while I was in QAnon. And when coming out of it, it's reconciliation. I had a lot of people who were quite upset and felt impact in various ways. And so I came out slowly, person by person, because I was also traumatized and a bit low resourced. So I took my time to connect with people and say, you know, I just want to acknowledge that during this period of time, I had fallen into QAnon and I might have expressed things that were difficult for you. And I want to let you know I'm out of it now and I'm open to hearing whatever impact there's been. And then I gave them space to express whatever was there. And my response was empathy. It was to say, oh, wow, okay, these are the feelings that I'm hearing in what you said. These are the ways in which I didn't meet your needs. And some people I was surprised, they're like, oh, there was no impact, I'm fine. but the cleanup work was where there was impact. So empathy first is the primary way that we resolve conflict in general.
Well, I'm noticing my desire for you to maybe talk about what Marshall says is the most important form of empathy, self-empathy. Maybe share with us how you kept yourself full, you know, and how you kept yourself capable of being able to stay open-hearted through the healing and the recovery time.
Mm-hmm. There was some amount of self-empathy I did. I would say that it was more in the direction of self-care. I had to go into a lot of self-care practices. In the book, by the way, the self-care, that recovery is part 5. There's 5 parts to the book. The first part sets up how I was vulnerable, everything that made me vulnerable to the fall into QAnon. The second part is the overnight flip, what actually happened in that 6-hour window of time that had my mind flip. The part 3 is what was my experience of being in QAnon? What was that like on a day-to-day basis? I'm generally very open and honest with my husband. I didn't tell him until day 3. I was terrified of telling him that I supported Trump. And so I really wrestled with that for a few days. But anyway, so it goes into that whole experience of like, oh my God, what do I do with seeing things totally different than 99% of my community in that navigation. Part 4 answers the question that I've been asked the most often from people who are struggling with friends and family members who've fallen down QAnon, which is what was it that got you out? How did that whole ideology crumble enough that you were able to exit from QAnon? That's generally what people want to know because they want something that can help them support their friends and family to wake up to that they have fallen for some amount of fantasy. I'm not going to say everything in QAnon is fantasy because for any conspiracy theory to stick, it's got to have some amount of fact in it. Otherwise, this is probably not going to stick. But to recognize that there's a lot of things that are not true. How do you let go of that? It's not easy. For somebody outside of it, it might be hard to understand how it sticks so strong. When I was in it, the thought that it could be wrong was terrifying. Have I been believing in a lie, a psyops, a propaganda campaign, a misinformation? Have I been posting all this stuff online? Have I been humiliating myself in front of my friends? If they're not going to save us from all the horrible things that's happening in the world, then what's going to happen? It's worse than I ever could imagine. Now there's no one to save us. How will I ever recover my own sense of self from that? My self-respect went down to the lowest it's ever been as I started to grapple with what I had fallen into. And then part 5 goes into recovery. How do you lift yourself up from that? How do you lift yourself up from being in a state of fear and anxiety into a state of well-being and enjoying life. So self-care was very important. I anchored into my meditation practice. I really focused my thoughts in ways that were supportive of life. I got back into the garden. I got back into working out. I cut all social media out. I took all of the social media apps off my phone. I didn't go onto them on my computer. I spent a lot less time on my computer, and I just had to work on my mind, and I had to work on my emotions. So there was some self-empathy. There was a recognition that I felt sadness. I felt ashamed. I felt embarrassed. I had a real deep need for belonging. I had a deep need to be seen clearly. I had a deep need for sense of security and stability with the people who I love. And I know my intentions have been good throughout the whole thing, even though there were a lot of people who couldn't see or understand that.
Yeah, and if I may, it's also talked about in section 4, but for those of you who might have friends or close ones that you're struggling with in this way, I guess a couple of things that I would want to I found it to be very useful advice that I got mainly from my therapist, and if the psychiatrist or psychologist that I consulted as well. It's to realize that you'll never change their mind, so don't try. So I started out with Katrina saying, trying to convince her that she had gone down a path that was wrong. And I was quickly corrected by the people around me to say that's a failing strategy. It
backfires.
It's just not going to work. It makes them entrench deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And so it creates more division. And so when I said earlier that I had given myself 6 months to either see if she came out or to see if we could come up with a way of living, even if she had stayed in it, that was around not trying to change her mind, trying to see if I could live with accepting that, and then putting the conversations around politics and things that were related to this into small boxes of time so that we could then just focus on life.
Mm-hmm.
We have a beautiful home, a beautiful yard, a beautiful family, lots of beauty around us that's very engaging, and dreams of our future and all those things that are plenty for us to focus on and plenty for us to find joy around. This becomes one small aspect. And the challenge for me in that 6-month period was, can we get there? Can we celebrate all the stuff we do love together and just accept that there's a part of our lives that we don't agree? And so that was part of the challenge. So anyway, I
really had to address my fear and anxiety that was coming up, and actually my dad, who's sitting next to me here, played a significant role in that. He introduced me to a talk by Jack Kornfield and another one that Oprah Winfrey did with Eckhart Tolle. These are very resonant with my own my spiritual foundation. And these videos help me grapple with the nature of uncertainty in life. I had gotten into this fear and anxiety trance and this screen addiction time, like research, because there were so many catastrophic possibilities coming our way, and I had to prepare for everything, and I had to know what to prioritize and had to talk with you about it. This fear and anxiety trance is the piece that I had to get over, because without getting over that, I was stuck in this trance, and Stephen was stuck with a partner who was emotionally absent. I was not capable of being present to my own life or to the people around me who I love.
Mm. Wow.
This was a very important wake-up piece for me that helped me make that final pivot to say, okay, there were a number of pieces that helped me pivot, but this was the final piece that had me pivot and say, okay, life is uncertain. All kinds of horrible things could happen. And when you're spinning in fear and anxiety, it seems like a horrible thing could happen any day now. It's right around the corner.
Mm.
But then I was reminded, like, you know, my parents' generation, they were taught that a nuke could go off anytime and you got to hide under your desk. It could happen anytime.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they lived long enough that I'm a grown adult now and it hasn't happened. Like there's so many things like that where we could spin in fear and waste away our life, or we could choose to say life is uncertain, and let's enjoy the beauty of this day. Let's enjoy the beauty of our friends and family and make the most of this precious moment, knowing that impermanence also brings a depth of meaning. It brings a gift to the moment.
Yeah.
I want to read some comments, and then there's actually a little concern that I want to express.
Yeah.
Silvana writes, I am deeply appreciative of both of you for sharing this journey. You're bringing a spark of hope. Susan Blomquist writes, this is a very important subject to discuss. You both have such bravery to bring light to this social issue. I noticed when I went to your recovery website, immediately I'm hit with this is a suspicious link marker.
Yeah.
I took a screenshot and I've sent you in a private text. And
Lovely.
then Joy just wrote also, when I clicked on the link for, www.recoverybook, I first got a suspicious link. And then after that, still going forward, she got another message saying, be careful, people might be trying to steal your information.
No.
So you may need to work
Okay.
on your SS information.
Yeah, it was working when we started the show here. So how interesting. The book is also available on Amazon. You can go directly there. I'd love for you to get to the website because we have the endorsements and we have downloadable excerpts of the introduction, of Stephen's advice, which is in the questions and answers section towards the end of the story. It's one of the appendices. And if the website's down right now, you can still get the book on Amazon.
Well, to be clear, the website's not down. We just
Okay,
need
it's got
people
some
to
suspicious-
understand that there are warnings that come up.
Yeah.
It is safe. So we can give our audience reassurance. Nobody's going to steal your information and it's safe to go to the website.
Yeah.
And I, of course, have pulled it up. So we'll take a look at it together right now, since we're talking about that. And then we're going to get back to the questions. But here is the website. So it is safe to go there, you guys. You're just going to get, whoops, after questions. Sorry about that. Where is it? Here we go. All right. Here's the website. And so you can read about the book. There's Barbara, by the way, who's with us in the chat box right now. And definitely put in your name and email address so that Katrina knows who's here. She can reach out to you. And then, of course, you can learn how to order it just by clicking order now. And that takes you to Amazon, which of course is the easiest way to order it. And let's all support her. This is an amazing book. It's an amazing read. It's a big book. It's over 400 pages. The last 40 being just incredible appendix. So it's a fascinating book. It's a wonderful read. And we want to hear a little bit more about the recovery part, a little bit more about that.
Sure. I also just want to say one of the best ways you can support us, if you choose to read the book, you like it, please post a review. If I can get 10 reviews up in this first window of time, it really increases visibility and it helps me get the book out to a wider audience. So that would be really meaningful. And of course, all of your feedback, your notes to me through the website are also very appreciated. If you have questions that could support me to create more content that supports you in challenges that you might be having related to this topic, all of that is appreciated. So I'm also noticing there's some other questions that came in through the chat that I just wanted to address. And one of them specifically because it came from my son.
Fair enough.
Oh, that question was, does the QAnon narrative center around US politics only? From everything I can tell, initially, yes. Initially, it did. It was about the US government. Q is a deep state US person. It's about Donald Trump. And the idea is that the United States is the most powerful country in the world. And we're also the last democratic stronghold. And if we lose our democracy to some kind of an authoritarian rulership, that could be game over for planet Earth. That is part of QAnon. However, it was really interesting for me as I came out of QAnon. I discovered that it was alive and well internationally, and that there was an international QAnon following, all rooting for Donald Trump and for Q and the White Hats. So it started out in our country, but it spread. And so I don't know how it's impacted politics in other areas, or if the focus continues to be about US politics. I haven't been following it in the last few years, but I can answer the question in that way.
And your son is asking a follow-up question. Do you have to buy on Amazon to be able to leave a review there?
I don't know for sure.
To leave an Amazon review? I think so.
I think you need to have, yeah,
I'm pretty sure so.
I think so.
Okay. And apparently, there's some comments that it might be a Zoom protection thing, because they got a similar warning going to almoshar.bandcamp. So,
Oh, okay.
it's July. Zoom changed a lot of stuff July 1st. So
Uh-huh.
a new Zoom thing. So anyway, it's safe to go to the website. Everybody go there and buy it. Does your father want to say anything? I know that Papa is right there. Do we want to bring Rob on to share a little bit?
Sure.
Sure, I'll move over.
There he is.
I I don't know. I've been intrigued by this interview. It's been quite an experience for me. And I really don't know if I can add anything of real value to the beautiful way that Katrina and Stephen have articulated the story. Just to say that I'm full of admiration and respect for Stephen. I think he's a prince. He did it. It's phenomenal throughout this entire thing. My Katrina, who I adore, I know her heart. I was unconditionally with her throughout this entire experience, and I knew she needed to have that type of support in order to stay emotionally stable. After which I encouraged her, I encouraged you to resource herself through her spirituality, which she just she mentioned. And I think that was one way that she was able then to develop enough stability and enough of a perspective on the toxicity of the information that she had digested.
Definitely.
Because that 10-part video that she referenced in the beginning that drew her into QAnon gets darker and darker and darker. I watched the first 7 parts, and that was enough for me. I couldn't go any further. It gets really dark, really bizarre.
I was bawling. I cracked open emotionally, felt devastated watching that. I was like, oh my God, it's this bad. It has to stop.
Right.
It has to stop.
And so what I suggested was that she was feeding herself emotional
Spiritual poison.
Spiritual
what
poison.
You called it.
Spiritual poison.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said you're digesting spiritual arsenic, and is that what you want to do to yourself? In terms of self-care. It was a really important thing. And I think you really grabbed onto that and thought about that. And once Katrina was able to take that in and realize, my God, I really ought to step back and maybe take a more unemotional, rational look at some of these beliefs. You found, for example, that there are lots and lots of people who believe that the earth is flat. There's a whole flat earth society out there. It's got a lot of adherents. And Katrina said to me, Papa, a lot of the things that these people believe are similar to what I've been reading in the QAnon.
Really weird.
They think the earth is flat and they're going to prove it.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of thing, I think, was part of the way she was able to crack through the brainwashing that she had experienced. She was able to set it aside and actually rationally start to consider point by point each of the beliefs and decide which contained any element of truth that was beneficial and which was simply toxic nonsense and that she could discard.
And there were also things I was like, I don't know, but I know that if I try and research this, I'm going to use a lot of time, a lot of emotional energy, and I'm going to feel depleted at the end of the day. And so there's a wisdom in saying, I don't know, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's that similar to that living with embracing uncertainty. It's okay that I don't know.
Yeah.
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 So-
The flat earth thing is another documentary called Behind the Curve on Netflix. And so that was another key point in the breaking down of the ideology I'd gotten swept up in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Papa.
Thank you, Papa. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Scott. You did a wonderful job with this.
Amy Wicker has a question for Katrina.
Mhm.
Think someone who is deep in the rabbit hole will feel seen reading the book and be able to see a way out? Or is it not written to bring them out, but to help others understand?
Thank you. It's a great question. I certainly hope so. I believe that this story has the possibility of helping somebody see their own reflection, their own struggle, to recognize they're not alone in it. And that by going on the journey with me, they can also start to have their ideology questioned in a new way, and to work with the challenges too, because again, it's very difficult when you've invested yourself in a belief system for a long time, and you've told other people this is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth, and then you have to go, whoa, what have I been believing in? It's almost more comfortable to just keep believing in it than to confront that question.
Well, because you've also probably alienated yourself from your prior community.
Yep.
And now
You
your
might have
entire
done harm.
community.
They may not want to welcome you back. So your new community that believes all this stuff is more comfortable than your old community that you have.
It's actually safer to stay where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is one of the difficult, sticky parts of this trap. My intention in writing the book is to make it equally safe for anybody anywhere on the political spectrum, whether they're far left to far right to anywhere in between to conspiracy theory, that it brings enough empathy into every point of view that it's safe enough for everyone to read. You know, it'll be confronting too in ways, of course, because you just can't talk about this without some discomfort coming up. But you know, I've been sharing it with select groups of friends and family initially, and again, most of the people in that circle for me are Democrat, progressive, and this is content they generally don't want to get into, and yet they've said, wow, this is very engaging, it's informative, it helped me understand things I'd never seen before. One person who read it, there was something I said in the book, and she said, I have so much more compassion now for why Republicans have a hard time with Planned Parenthood, because of one of these points that I had about the founder of Planned Parenthood was part of the eugenics movement. And I didn't know that before QAnon. It's in the book. You can look up the reference. Planned Parenthood on their website acknowledges, yes, this is true, and how they work with that. But understandably, for people who are really strong Christians and really have that right to life, the connection between the beginning of Planned Parenthood and eugenics is one that stimulates emotion. So that's one example of many inside of this book that help to bridge these divides, that help people understand each other through storytelling in a way that I hope is really safe and accessible across the spectrum.
Beautiful. We're winding down. There's a couple more questions left, but I want to take people to Katrina's main website, she created these wonderful Love Smart cards. Some of us have them. And so her main website is lovesmartcards.com. She is a workshop leader. She's a mediator. She's a wonderful coach. Katrina co-founded Love Coach Academy with me, 12 years ago, I think now. And so you can learn a lot more about Katrina by going to lovesmartcards.com. And you can actually buy the book directly from her there. If you go to shop, that's where you can buy the Love Smart cards, which are a wonderful, wonderful tool. And of course, there's the book, and you can get it in paperback, you can get it as an ebook, or you can get a hardcover copy. While we're right here, do you want to talk a little bit about your Love Smart cards?
Sure. The Love Smart cards are a social emotional learning tool that I developed when my son was 9 years old. And it was very early on in my NVC days. I knew that I wanted to learn nonviolent communication. I could tell it was a very powerful tool and that it was an essential tool to support me to have a much better co-parenting relationship with my son's father and to rebuild my relationship with my son. He had been living with his father for most of the previous 5 years. It was a little over 4 years. And our time apart had also had a lot of impact. The cards were more powerful than I could have imagined. My son and I were going through pretty tremendous challenges when I was able to reestablish custody. And we would have a predictable conflict once a day. He'd wrap himself around my leg and he'd start screaming, I hate you, I hate you. I want to live with my dad. And this was the fit I got every day. It used to be that I couldn't talk about that without crying. And now it doesn't faze me because my relationship with my son is so amazing. It's pinch me wonderful. So what was surprising for me with the cards is that once I made them, I created this game to play with him. We played a basic empathy game, right? I said empathy first is a main principle of nonviolent communication. It's the cornerstone that helps to resolve conflict. We played an empathy game for a half hour. And at the end of that half hour, my son turned to me and he said, Mommy, I love you. He wrapped his arms around me and gave me the sweetest hug. And his fit stopped overnight. He's 26 now, and in that time, we've only had like 2 conflicts between age 9 and 26. We have an amazing relationship where we can speak openly. His emotional intelligence also is very surprising to a lot of the adults around him. So the card tool supports rapid learning of this foundational nonviolent communication skill, this basic skill of empathy, to be able to listen to another person or yourself and identify feelings and needs. It also supports character development and gratitude and a process you can use to regulate your own emotions, to come back to center, to gain clarity and to resource yourself to re-enter a difficult conversation with a wider perspective of the dynamics that are at play between you and another person. So that's a little bit about the Love Smart cards. Is there anything you want to say? I also have a couple books on there besides Recovery. One of them is Ignite Love, that has the story of the creation of the Love Smart cards and my relationship to my son and his father. So that's in that Ignite Love book. And then there's Pathways to Liberation. And that is it's a tool along with a journal. It's a self-assessment tool that is used by the Center for Nonviolent Communication in their certification process. It has what's called the Nonviolent Communication Skills Matrix. And what's wonderful about that tool is you can go through page by page and you can look at each of these skills and really reflect, where am I when it comes to having feelings awareness or needs awareness? Where am I I'd have to have them in front of me to remember all of the categories that are in there. But you can look to see, is this something that I have no awareness of? Do I have awareness, but I don't know how to use it in my life? Is it something that I'm starting to be able to use? And is it something I can use under pressure? And so there's these 4 levels of mastery. And so you can really assess, where am I at? But it also gives you visibility into where you can develop your skills in support of having what in nonviolent communication we call compassionate consciousness. Because ultimately nonviolent communication is a tool to transform our consciousness so that we can relate to ourselves and the world around us really from that state of compassion. So just wanted to let you know that that's there as well.
Beautiful. And your son, Jaden, who is with us, actually writes, Love Smart cards help you to see someone and to be seen. They are a tool to put words to your emotions and lay out for the other person what you think they might be feeling on any particular conflict.
Excellent.
So,
Good job, Jaden.
Yeah.
all right. This is going to be the last question of the day. And it comes from Drina Joy. Again, she thanks both you, Katrina, and Stephen. And she writes, in light of all these different search results that show us how targeted we are on the various social media sites, and adding to that the even more advanced algorithms, AI-generated fake news, deep fakes, audios, and videos, it becomes even more important to be able to discern truth from propaganda, and not only in the political realm. So the question is, what is your advice on the best way to do that?
So one of the pieces that I would give you is something I found online, and I have this in the final learnings and reflections and learnings. So this is in the appendix C of the book, and it's about popping your filter bubble. So these AI algorithms that confirm your bias are called filter bubbles, and we all have them. Doesn't matter who you are, you go online, you search for things, a filter bubble is created. And so that filter bubble will continue to go on autopilot unless you very consciously pop the filter bubble. And you have to do that over and over. It's not like one and done, right? Because as soon as you start searching consistently for something, you have reformed a filter bubble. So I found a site online, and it says that there's 10 ways to pop a filter bubble. One is that you want to understand that information is being filtered. You want to intentionally seek out opposing viewpoints, seek news from a variety of sources, evaluate the credibility of information sources, watch for bias, seek out less biased news outlets. Don't avoid the hard conversations, engage in them. Don't unfriend those who disagree with you. Listen with the intent to learn and question your own perspectives. These are ways that we pop our filter bubble. Now, in terms of intentionally seeking out opposing viewpoints, news from a variety of sources, one of the things that can be deceiving is that there are many, many, many news sources that are owned by these major conglomerates. Our news stations, all of the major news stations, hundreds of them are owned by 6 media companies. So sometimes you think you're looking at a variety, but you're actually looking at 8 news sources that are all owned by the same conglomerate. And so it's kind of in a comfort zone.
But that conglomerate may not express editorial control. So you have to be careful about that type of characterization.
Sure. So one of the ways that we sought to evaluate news sources, and I don't know that this is the best way, but it's the best way we've found so far, is that there's a website called Media Bias Fact Check. Now, if you tell a QAnon to go to Media Bias Fact Check, the moment they hear fact check, they'll say it's fake news, just to be warned. So it's not necessarily something I would recommend you try to use there. However, if you go to this website, you can look up any news channel, and it will let you know based on their criteria is transparent. They let you know if that news source is mostly false, mostly true, completely true, or somewhere, nothing is completely true, mostly false, mostly true, or somewhere in between on a 5-point scale. It will also let you know where it is in terms of bias, how far it is right or left bias. And so generally what I want to look for are news sources that score high in terms of truthfulness. They have a high score for giving accurate news. And then, you know, if they're totally left bias or totally right bias, that's fine. But if I'm going to look at something that's totally right bias or totally left bias, let me look at the opposite as well on the same topic so that I can get a more complete picture of what's going on, right? That helps me. If you've got two people who are completely biased on the same topic, but there's an area of overlap, that area of overlap is likely pretty accurate. So that can just help you start to notice what the bias is and see what sources are more trustworthy. You know, it's so difficult though. I just want to really acknowledge there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and bias that gets woven in. And sometimes the news reporters themselves are given information that is not accurate. And so they speak it from their heart. They believe they're telling the truth. And yet some point later, we discovered that they were also misinformed. And it's a just difficult nature of our news, our media landscape right now. Anything you would add to that?
Just during this whole episode back in 2020, it became very clear to me how biased media is and how accuracy is far less important than getting resonance with the viewership. We were spending some time in Sedona because of the fires in the Bay Area. And I happened to drive to go see my daughter. So I left for a couple of days, and I was just driving through the deserts of Arizona, listening on the radio. I could only find Republican radio channels. And the information, I surfed through a lot of different ones, and the information that was being shared about Democratic positions was so blatantly off message for anything that Democrats hear that it just became so, it's like, oh my God, I can imagine if Republicans are hearing this and believing this, of course they think Democrats are from another planet. But it's just, there was so much falsity in what was being said that it made me just say, I just have to let this stuff go. I can't spend my precious life energy trying to understand and debunk what's going on in the news. So a lot of it's been really just focusing on what's happening in front of me, what's happening in front of us, things that we can control.
And yet it can be helpful to listen to that enough to go, oh, wow, this is what other people believe. Oh, wow, this is the other world. You know, it makes me think of John Gray wrote a book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And it was this revolutionary, like, whoa, we're from different planets. Let's figure out, let's understand each other's planets so that we can talk to each other. You know, so I see a very similar thing between Democrats and Republicans. There's a way in which the media, it has created a war machine that's really making the other wrong in so many ways. Totally. If we can rise above that as informed citizens and we can go, okay, here's the planet I'm on, and I can't completely see my planet because it's hard to see the forest for the trees, but this is where I'm at. And let me see if I can see that planet. So I have a broader view and I'm not completely stuck on my planet. I can see that you are in a different world. It's difficult to do. I mean, I have to say, when I flipped into QAnon, I also flipped into conservative media. It was like I had gone to a different planet. It was a parallel reality because it was so remarkably different. And what was ironic was that every criticism the left had of the right had of the left. The mirroring was mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, and make no mistake, that what I described about the Republicans, it's happening on the Democratic side absolutely also.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, again, that's the polarization that we as global peace drivers need to really learn from Katrina and Stephen in this example. We are completing.
At our time.
Thank you so much, all three of you, acknowledging Rob as well, for being with us tonight, and for taking the time to write this incredible book, Katrina. It is amazing. It's an incredible accomplishment to write any book, let alone 400 pages of personal story that is so well written, and that everybody who's reading it is like, oh my God, it's an amazingly well-written book. So let's all support it. Let's buy the book. Let's write reviews. And thank you very much, Katrina, for who you are. Thank you, Stephen, for demonstrating devotion at the highest level. And thank you, Rob, for giving birth to this wonderful daughter that we love so very much.
I've got
Thank
to
you.
acknowledge the role my wife played as well.
Yes.
I do just want to let people know, John King is still doing across the aisle meetings twice a month. And he has another new offering that's happening twice a month. If you go to johnkenyon.com, that's open to the public. I highly recommend it for people who want to learn how to have difficult conversations using nonviolent communication. And so just wanted to plug that because it's an entire chapter in my book and really made a huge difference again in my deprogramming and coming back to my center in the situation. Thank you so much, everyone,
Thank you,
for
Scott.
joining us here.
again
Thank
so
you,
much.
Scott, for hosting.
Thank you.
Good
We,
night.
of course, are going to conclude with an Omashar song, as we always do. But I want to remind everybody, now is a wonderful time to subscribe if you haven't already, and many of the people in our Zoom room have subscribed. But for those of you who haven't subscribed yet, join us. We've got wonderful shows planned. You know, Katrina mentioned John Gray. He was just on the show last week. He's going to be on again. And we bring you amazing people that you do know, like John Gray and Marianne Williamson. We also bring you the next generation, people like Katrina. So do subscribe to the Global Peace Tribe. Catch our shows, become part of our beautiful community. And it's easy, just go to globalpeacetribe.com. I'll also put a link into the chat box where people can subscribe. Now's a great time because it's the first show of our new 3-month season. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. And I'm going to turn it over to our beloved Omashar. I love the back. There you go.
There you go. And the dream team, Rob and Stephen and Katrina, I just felt the love pouring out of the three of you. And I was really grateful to see your father, Katrina, because mine's left the planet, and I felt his steering and his part in your life, and it was palpable. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And I managed to grab this image because I think it's just before she fell down the rabbit hole. And I'm going to sing we are going to sing a group song now, and sung it several times. Used to be on the Sacred Sunday show, but it's just familiar for us now. I'm going to pop it in the chat, and please feel free to sing along. We'll sing it 3 or 4 times. It's pretty short. And all righty then. So thank you very much. Thank you muchly very.
Take a deep breath, hands on your heart, back into the center. Is that center left or center right?
Thank you, Merch.
Here with my family, heaven is in my heart. I sing of the love I am, and know it never apart. One heart, one love, one If you're gonna dance, you gotta sing, please. Here with my family, heaven is in my heart. I sing of the love I am, and know we're never apart. You add it on too. One heart, one love, one life we live. One heart, one love, one life we There is only one heart, one love, one life we live. One heart, one love, one life we live. One more time. Wake up your neighbors. Here with my family, heaven is in my heart. I sing of the love I am, and know we're never apart. One heart, one love, one life we live. One heart, one love, one life we live. We
Gallery review, everybody. Lots and lots of love and twinkles for beloved Omar Shar,
And
who
beloved Katrina and Rob and Stephen.
absolutely, I'm going to add her one more time. Another wonderful, wonderful show. Thank you again, Katrina. So proud.
Thank you.
And want to let everybody know that this Saturday night, make sure you're in the Zoom room because we're going to be providing healing. Probably, I think our favorite, or one of our favorite psychic healers, Kalina, will be back doing private psychic readings and healings for members of our audience. And she's amazing. And then we have several other soul search psychics and healers all coming in with kind of the theme of, you know, it's Independence Day weekend and how to create personal freedom and independence by healing and liberating ourselves. But make sure you're in the Zoom room because we will be choosing members of the audience to receive healing treatments. And Fanny will be back playing her harp. And of course, Omar Shar will be with us. So make sure you're with us live on Saturday night. And we've got great shows planned all through the summer. Thank you again, Omar Shar. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Have a beautiful evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. Good night.